Hello, welcome to today's Weapons of War podcast. Your host, Eden Chonde, as usual. Today, I want to tackle a topic about racism, but I pick it from a clip that trended earlier this week, featuring Ian Wright and Gary Neville, and I think Roy Keane and Rooney on their podcast, talking about mainly why Jude Bellingham is receiving the kind of criticism he has received from the English media and sections of the English fans, I guess, and they are discussing what this whole entire episode means. And before I delve further into my take on this subject matter, I would like you to have a look at the clip.
I don't think they're ready for a black superstar like that who can move like Jude's moving. You know, they can't touch him, like I just said. He goes out there, he performs, he does what he does. He says who else. It's too uppity for these people. You know, I put it in a football term. So everybody, they love N'Golo Kante. He's a humble black man, gets on with what he's doing. I'm not saying that he's an Uncle Tom or anything, just saying that's how his personality is. But if you get a Pogba or a Bellingham and you get that kind of energy, that does not sit well with the people, that kind of person. So someone like Jude, for some reason, frightens these people because of his capability and the inspiration he can give. It's something that you're taught when you're, as a black man, when you're going out there, you just want to try and do the best you can and keep your head down and be, for want of a bit, a humble slave. This is where this is dragging up from that kind of energy. Because if you are outspoken black and doing that kind of, playing to that kind of level and not caring, that frightens certain people. And that's what's going to happen with Jude. This guy who I'm telling you about in respects of he's obsessed with him. He's moving off of that energy. He can't look and see a black man doing what Jude's doing and think that that's not uppity. He's not an uppity. That's where I'm going with that. That's where that comes down to.
All right, so Ian Wright, especially in this particular clip, mentioned that they are not ready. I think some sections in England, media or the public, they are not ready for a black superstar who is moving like Jude is moving. He says, who is arrogant. He uses that epithet, someone who's arrogant, who's self-entitled, but that they want a person in the mold of N'Golo Kante, the Frenchman, who is humble, just goes on pitch and does his job. But when it comes to the characters of Jude Bellingham and Pogba, who are not just good on pitch, but they're outspoken and they have this arrogance and swagger around them, that some sections are not ready for such a black man. And he talks about that they want them to be humble. The F word goes in there, like celebs, and that Jude frightens such people because of his arrogance and ability to inspire people. And we've seen much of that in the World Cup. He's been really on form, a great leader, a great carrier of the ball, a guy who gets his team by the scruff of the collar, and like dragging them to the finish line. So he's done well. But in regard to the analysis of Ian Wright when it comes to, and it's not unique to him, that whenever usually it comes to criticism of blacks out there these days, it always zeroes down to racism. There's always a tendency to attribute things to racism, to the skin color, to their skin colors, which I tend to much of the time disagree with. At times, and because of the reasons I'm going to give here, I'll start with an example. Earlier on, in the previous decade, also, some of us grew up watching perhaps the peak time of tennis in the world, when we're watching Federer at the top of his game, the Swiss maestro Roger Federer, who moved on court with such elegance and grace. I haven't spotted a tennis player play like that. The way he played would get you thinking that you can also get on court and do the things that he did. He had one of the sweetest backhands, one-handed, and it was far much better than some players' forehands. And I'm talking about professional players here, not me and you. Stay somewhere. But such was his grace, such was his finesse. He mastered the art. Tennis was flowing in his veins. And as he was coming through as, the alpha male, the greatest, the first of 10, then came the Spanish, a Spanish gladiator Nadal, Rafa Nadal. He came through, brute and guts. Of course, he was talented. You couldn't challenge Federer if you aren't talented. But he had this guts, he had this energy that he was willing to walk of a bulldog. So and then they formed this fierce rivalry. Yet they had this bromance off the court. And I don't know how they managed to maintain the bromance in spite the fierce rivalry on court, because much of the players that we see today sitting next to each other, like Roy Keane and Vieira, I mean, today they can sit across the table, have this banter, back and forth, laugh. But during their heydays, I don't think they could even live within the same town. So, but these two, Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer, they had this fierce rivalry on court, vying for every point, vying for every game, and titles, going for titles head to head. And yet they maintained the bromance. But the bromance is not the issue. It's the rivalry that was brewing. At first, Nadal was, a one-court wonder, only a clay court specialist, but later acclimatized to other surfaces, like the hard courts, like the grass in Wimbledon, and the US Open hard courts. And he started to pick up titles, even beyond the clay at Roland Garros. And he was challenging Federer on all these surfaces. And Federer's main issue was he wasn't touching. When it came to the clay surface, you couldn't touch Nadal. So the rivalry was intense. And the tennis world at the time was divided between those for the Swiss master and those for the challenger, who was Rafa Nadal. Of course, it was a clash of styles, the finesse and artistry and poetry of Federer against the brute guts of Nadal. The archetypical sports story, if you remember, Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, one who used to float around like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and then the brawler who just came through to knock Muhammad Ali's head off the neck. A clash of styles usually makes good sporting rivalries, and that's what we're having between Nadal and Federer. And then guess what? In the midst of that rivalry, the tennis world is divided. Those who fought tennis, I don't think anyone sat out this rivalry, that they were neutrals. And then who started to crop up? Djokovic started to come up as a third option. And of course, he didn't receive as much affection as these two, and that was from the fans and from the media. He started to challenge them here and there. He started to pick tournaments, started to pick Grand Slams, and it became a formidable force that from the big two, it became the big three. Of course, later on, Andy Murray also was included in that because he picked up a Grand Slam. You have to give it to that Brit. I think the best that has come through in terms of tennis from the UK. But Djokovic held his own. He came and started to challenge this duopoly of Federer and Nadal. But he was not getting the affection. He was not getting the attention and the affection and the love from the fans and from the media. Why? Because in so many people's eyes, and like to summarize, I think by Federer, that he came off like was crashing a party, because people had this party going on, this rivalry going on between these two people, Rafa and Federer, and then this other force is coming through. People didn't warm up so much to him. Why? Because they're already in love with Rafa, and some are already in love with Federer. They couldn't split. And then pick up a third option. Actually, perhaps the only time people supported Federer was Nadal fans would support Djoko when he was playing Federer, and Federer fans would support Djokovic when he was playing Rafael Nadal. They supported him because they hated the other party, or they disliked the other party. So that's why. But we all know, or we analyzed it in that sense that, hey, it's a third force coming through, and our affection is already split between Federer and Rafael Nadal, and that explains the lack of affection. But imagine for a moment if Djokovic was a black man, and he came through and made this rivalry of Rafael Nadal and Federer, and he didn't get the affection that was due his talent and effort, at least like we've come to see. what would then have we have concluded? Every pundit, most of the pundits would have concluded, you know what, it's racism, it's just racism. The tennis world is not ready for a black superstar. Because when it comes to blacks, people always tend to go for race, always want to go for the quick thing, skin color. They want to explain everything in terms of skin color. But with Djokovic, people had to sit and say, okay, this guy is highly talented, speaking Grand Slams, speaking titles, he's a formidable force. Why isn't he getting the affection? And then people started to analyze, you know, the aspects around the way he rose and what was happening in the tennis world. And, you know, you may agree with it or not, but it came off like was get crashing a party. People were enjoying this duopoly, Rafa Federer duopoly, and then he comes through. You get what I'm saying? So it's that kind of thing that when it's a black man, people don't want to think about anything. No, the reason they don't like him, at Djokovic being a black man, the simple reason it would have been is racism. The tennis world is not ready for a black superstar in tennis. Therefore, it's racist, it's the media, it's the people, it's the fans, it's short, and that would have been the end of the discussion. No one would have wanted to look at the other aspects and elements around the tennis world at the time. And I can also bring it fast forward to last season, when Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, the protege, was taking on his master, Pep Guardiola, vying for the Premier League title. You know, they called Arsenal all manner of names, haram football, that they were playing like Stoke, Tony Police's Stoke. And those who never watched that Tony Police's Stoke, please, that's not a flattering word at all. The comparison is not flattering at all. That was a side that relied heavily on set pieces and had players that were tall and physical. Throw-ins, corners were like penalty kicks to them, and so they're like Arsenal, or they likened Arsenal to that Stoke City, and they said, oh man, of the set piece FC. And you know, this was not just social media banter. Even mainstream media picked on that, calling it haram football and set piece FC. But imagine for a second if Mikel Arteta was a black manager managing Arsenal, taking on the juggernaut of Pep Guardiola, who has dominated the Premier League for the past 10 years. And people are calling this black manager, calling his football haram football, a set piece FC. In fact, I think it was Paul Scholes or whatever pundit it was who said that if Arsenal were to go on and win the Premier League, they were going to be the worst Premier League champions he has ever seen. Imagine if those things were being said of a black manager managing Arsenal, vying for the Premier League title. The conclusion would have been, no, the English media and the fans and the sports fans are not ready for a black manager managing a top side vying for the Premier League title. We would not have listened to any other analysis thereafter. Everything would have come down to race, color of the skin of the manager, and would have said they don't like him because of that. And I see there's something coming through with Jude Bellingham when people are discussing him, why he's criticized at times unfairly. I think so, because there's even this panic that was suggesting that he should be left home. How do you leave Jude Bellingham home? One of the core leaders of that team, whether he has the armband or not. Again, of course, that was senseless from him. But imagine for a second if Arteta was black, what would have been the arguments? Racism. Imagine for a second if Djokovic was black, what would have been the reasons for the lack of affection from the tennis world? Racism. But because they are white, we think of other reasons. Same thing with Bellingham. For me, you can think about other reasons. It doesn't always have to be because he's black, it's racism. Because he's black, therefore it's racism. No, it's not racism. For God's sake, that the media, especially in England, likes so much to stoke fires. These people even almost get to levels of sabotaging their own team. We just saw it after they defeated Norway. Their interview in Tuchel here, he talks about how the team, did not stick to tactics and all, how they played poorly, though they had the mentality to win. And then they go and bait also Bellingham into giving a comment. It's as if there's so much like edgy kind of news that will start talkability so much that they'll do it to anyone. You don't have to be black, you don't have to be white. That's just their media. They'll poke their noses in each and everything, pick out any dirt, no matter what. That's who they are. You get. Now, for me, for someone to look at Jude's situation, some of the unfair criticism we received, especially before the World Cup, and people want to reduce it to race, please stop it. It's not that simplistic. You get. Some were even suggesting that Morgan Rogers is better. I'm like, and I love Morgan Rogers. He's had a wonderful season. Very fantastic player, can play in position in attack. But it's not down to racism. It's down to, one, the English media. They love that. They love to start talkability, to be edgy. That's who they are. You get. For example, for me, and in terms of some of the overboard reporting, remember when Beckham got that red card in '98 against Argentina. And I'm recording this as England just lost again to Argentina yesterday. But the media is very unkind to Beckham. The red card was stupid. It wasn't even a tackle. It was an off-the-ball incident. But some of the headlines, moment of lunacy that cost cap hopes. Some said 10 heroic lions, one stupid boy. And then there was this hate mob that was targeting the Beckham family. Look at those ugly headlines that were targeted towards Beckham, a white man. But no one touches that. But had Beckham been a black man, and now we are looking back to these headlines, what would you have concluded that would have been? Would have easily said, oh, racism, that was racism at its peak. I mean, there is no reason to abuse someone like that because they got a red card. No, respect someone. Even if you're criticizing them, criticize them with respect. That's what we would have said. But when it comes down to a black person, it's always skin color, skin color, skin color. And I hate it that any debate or discussion around a black person, especially when they're receiving a negative praise or criticism, it comes down to their skin color. And I don't mean that the criticism is fair. No, at times it's unfair. But that criticism may be coming from somewhere else, because most of this media actually they're like fans. They are fickle. You are as good as your previous game. If you come and play badly, they'll tear you to pieces. If you come and play well, they'll easily crown you as the best ever. And perhaps next only to Messi. They'll call you a generational talent. Score a brace, they'll call you a generational talent. They'll sing your praises. Mess up the next game, they'll wonder what you are doing on the team. It's just the media. They're like a pendulum. They keep swinging from one end to the other end. They never have this middle ground to discuss things. So for me, that's why I don't buy so much into. There are some sections that are not ready for a black superstar. These are the same sections, if I may say, media sections that have almost unanimously agreed that the best Premier League player is a black man. The best Premier League player ever is a black man, and that's Thierry Henry. And and despite other players having won more titles, but they argue that the best Premier League player is a black man. These are some of the sections that idolized way back before John Barnes. He was a black man, perhaps not the superstar on the team, that perhaps boasted of the guy lineakers and all, but they idolized the guy. So for me, someone to come and reduce the criticism, fair or unfair, actually much of it unfair, regarding Jude Bellingham, and trying to reduce it to racism, to skin color, for me, that's hogwash, really. I don't buy that. It's just the English media being the English media, and they just swing from one end to the other end, and it's them wanting to poke and look for talkability, points. That's all they do, much of the time. Actually, most foreigners that have gotten to England have been astonished by the culture of the media, that they ask way beyond even football, into your family, into what, and some media in other places, they just stick to what you do, to your profession. So I disagree with Ian Wright, and much of this talk about racism, much of it is meant actually to start division. It's not even to find solutions to an issue. It's to start divisions. And I love what in a clip I watched some time back, they were interviewing, I think, Morgan Freeman. about racism, that what should they do about racism in America is too much. He says, stop talking about it. Because he knows that the people, the more you talk about something, at times you are fanning the flames. Even if there are just a sparkle here and there, and you keep talking, and you give it energies that it doesn't deserve, you give it attention that it doesn't deserve. Now, I'm not saying that there are no racists out there. They are there. But when things happen to someone, why are we so quick to go to skin color? They're just, at times someone is just ill-mannered, that what he has done to Bellingham, he will also go and do to Foden, and he also go and do to Kyle Palmer. Someone is just ill-mannered at times. But we cannot be reducing every criticism or bad praise, especially the unfair kind, about black players or black personalities to their skin colors. No, I think that's wrong, and that is not at all meant to look for solutions. It stirs more divisions. Now imagine Jude Bellingham stepping out there. But he's a strong guy, and I like that his character is so good that another person would start walking around with chips on his shoulders. Whatever he does, he thinks people hate him. Because of his skin color. People don't like me because of my skin color. No. I don't like someone moving out there with chips on their shoulders, and especially chips they can't do anything about. If someone hates you because of a bad game you had, you can go and improve and see what you can do better. What are you going to do about your skin color? Especially if someone has gotten you so sensitive about it. And I see most of us are so sensitive about it that I, a black person, can go and do a wrong thing to my fellow black man, and they'll say I'm ill-mannered. It's bad manners, that's all. But if a white guy goes and does the same thing to them, they will term it as racism. That's wrong. Some of those white people are just ill-mannered. They may not be exactly racist, unless someone, of course, has more receipts to that effect, that actually this person has done all this, and then you can tell us that their energies are coming from the racism that was talked about in the slavery days. That's it for now. Till the next episode.